Welcome to Hidden Chapters Military. There's a gap in the record here. That's where this story lives. Let's begin. Orders said keep moving. But war zones don't always give you perfect choices. I stopped for one injured stranger, and months later learned he was being forced to hack a bank. This is the hidden chapter behind that decision. Convoys are built around one rule: keep moving. Not fast. Not reckless. Just steady. Predictable movement keeps everyone safer than hesitation ever does. Stops create vulnerability. Unplanned stops create risk nobody fully controls. That morning, our route looked routine. Supply transfer between two secured zones. Mixed terrain, broken pavement, dust corridors, abandoned structures along the roadside. Nothing unusual for that region. Still, tension always exists. It never disappears. It just settles into the background until something pulls it forward again. Radio checks were clean. Visibility decent. Lead vehicle reported no obstacles ahead. Standard spacing maintained. I sat in the third vehicle, monitoring both external movement and internal comms, half automatic after years in service. Then the lead vehicle slowed. Not a full stop. Just enough to ripple through the convoy. That alone raised attention levels. Slowing without explanation usually means something unexpected appeared. Possible debris on roadside, came over the radio. Debris isn't unusual either. Conflict zones accumulate remnants fast. Most of the time you observe, adjust path, continue. But this wasn't debris. As our vehicle passed the location, I saw him. A man near the ditch line. Civilian clothes. Not moving much. Dust covered. One arm positioned unnaturally. Hard to assess injuries at convoy speed, but enough indicators suggested he wasn't simply resting. Orders stayed clear. Do not stop unless direct threat or mission-critical need. Humanitarian instinct and operational discipline rarely align perfectly. That tension is part of military life. You learn to balance both without compromising safety. I reported visual confirmation calmly. Possible injured civilian roadside. Condition unknown. Silence for a few seconds. That's normal. Command weighs risk, mission priority, security assessment. Seconds feel longer when someone might need help. Maintain movement, command responded. Security uncertain. That was expected. And correct, from a purely operational perspective. Still, something about the situation didn't sit right. The positioning. Lack of nearby vehicles. No visible habitation. No obvious reason for a civilian to be there alone. As our vehicle passed fully, I made a judgment call. Not heroic. Not impulsive. Calculated. Request 30-second rear security check, I transmitted. Vehicle systems showing minor alert. Technically true. Not the main reason, but enough justification for a brief controlled pause without compromising convoy integrity. Command hesitated. Then approved. 30 seconds. That's all. Driver slowed slightly, pulled to edge just long enough for me to step out with rear security coverage maintained. No dramatic movements. No panic. Just controlled assessment. Up close, injuries were clearer. Bruising. Possible fracture. Signs of dehydration. And something else, restraint marks on wrists. Faint but noticeable. That detail changed context immediately. Not accident. Not random collapse. Something had happened to him. I checked airway, responsiveness, pulse. Weak but present. Eyes opened briefly. Confused, exhausted. No coherent speech yet. Behind me, the convoy waited. 30 seconds were already almost gone. Decision time. Because sometimes helping someone doesn't just mean compassion. Sometimes it interrupts something larger you don't see yet. And at that moment, I had no idea how true that would turn out to be. 30 seconds disappear fast when someone's life might depend on what you do next. His pulse was weak but steady enough. Breathing shallow. No obvious severe bleeding, but internal injury couldn't be ruled out. The wrist marks I'd noticed earlier looked more deliberate the closer I examined them, not random scrapes. Pressure marks. Possibly restraints. That detail shifted priority immediately. Accidents leave chaos. Restraints leave intention. And intention usually means risk isn't finished yet. I signaled to the driver. Load him. Quick. No argument. That's the benefit of working with experienced crews, fewer questions, faster decisions. Rear security kept scanning surroundings while we lifted him carefully into the vehicle. Convoy command came back on the radio almost instantly. Confirm unscheduled passenger. Confirmed, I answered. Medical necessity. Possible criminal involvement. Silence again. Longer this time. Not approval. Not refusal. Just recalculation happening somewhere beyond our visual horizon. Then. Continue movement. Medical evaluation en route. That was the best outcome available. Because once someone is inside the convoy, responsibility shifts. You don't abandon a casualty mid-route. That principle still holds even in complicated environments. Inside the vehicle, space tightened. Equipment repositioned quickly. I stabilized him as best as possible with what we had: hydration, fracture support, monitoring. Nothing advanced, but enough to keep him stable until a proper facility. He regained partial consciousness about 20 minutes later. Eyes unfocused at first. Then awareness flickered. Pain registered. Confusion followed. Normal sequence. Easy, I said calmly. You're safe for now. He tried speaking. Voice rough, barely audible. They'll, look. Not coherent yet, but meaningful. Who? I asked quietly. No answer. Just fatigue pulling him back under. Still, the implication lingered. Someone might be searching for him. Convoy posture adjusted subtly after that. Spacing increased slightly. Communications tightened. No dramatic alarm, just professional awareness rising a notch. That's how experienced units operate. Calm adjustments instead of visible tension. We reached the secured zone without incident. Medical team was already waiting. Standard handoff procedures. Quick assessment confirmed dehydration, minor fractures, exhaustion, but nothing immediately life-threatening. Good news considering where we'd found him. Then came identification. Or lack of it. No documents. No phone. No personal items except damaged clothing. Not unusual in conflict environments, but combined with restraint marks, questions multiplied. Authorities took over from there. Not our jurisdiction anymore. We documented the recovery, submitted the operational report, and returned to routine duties. Officially, that was the end of our involvement. Another civilian assisted. Another unpredictable moment handled professionally. At least that's how it looked. Weeks passed. No updates. No follow-up requests. Which usually means either everything resolved quietly, or information moved somewhere beyond your clearance level. I didn't dwell on it much. Military rhythm doesn't allow extended reflection. New missions, new priorities, new environments. Still, every now and then I'd remember his half-conscious words. They'll look. At the time, I assumed trauma confusion. Later, I'd realize he wasn't confused at all. And the people he was worried about had reasons to keep searching. I didn't expect to hear about him again. That's usually how these situations end. You help someone, transfer responsibility, file the report, and move on. Military timelines rarely pause long enough for follow-ups, especially when civilians are involved. So when Operations Command contacted me 3 weeks later, it caught me off guard. Not an emergency tone. Not urgent. Just formal. Brief consultation requested. Non-operational. That phrasing alone was unusual. Most post-mission consultations happen immediately. Delayed requests usually mean new information surfaced after the fact. Information somebody decided you should hear directly. I reported to the admin building that afternoon. Small office. Neutral setting. 2 civilians present alongside 1 liaison officer. Professional atmosphere. No tension, just controlled seriousness. The civilian woman introduced herself first. Cybersecurity consultant, she said simply. The man next to her added, government contractor liaison. No agency names. No specific affiliations. That's normal when discussions cross jurisdictions. Then they asked about the roadside recovery. Not tactical details, those were already in reports. They focused on impressions. Behavior. Physical condition. Anything unusual beyond medical observations. I mentioned the restraint marks. The fragmented speech. His overall exhaustion level. They exchanged brief glances. Confirmation without saying it directly. That's when they told me. The man we picked up wasn't just a civilian traveler. He was a known IT security expert. Not public celebrity level, but highly respected inside cybersecurity circles. Specialized in banking infrastructure protection. Digital intrusion prevention. High-level financial systems. Which explains several things at once. Why he had no documents. Why restraint marks mattered. Why authorities showed delayed interest. Because someone had likely tried to use his expertise. Against his will. The liaison officer kept the explanation carefully general. No ongoing threat, he said. But potential criminal exploitation scenario under investigation. Translation. Kidnapping attempt. Forced cooperation attempt. Probably related to financial cybercrime. Nothing confirmed yet. But strong indicators. That reframed the entire roadside scene. Not accident. Not random collapse. Escape. Or abandonment after failed coercion. And suddenly his half-conscious warning made sense. They'll look. Of course they would. People investing that much effort into acquiring specialized expertise rarely give up easily. I asked the obvious question. Is he safe now? The cybersecurity consultant nodded. Yes. Stable. Under protection. And very aware someone intervened at the right time. That last part carried weight. Because cybersecurity experts understand timing better than most. Systems fail or succeed on milliseconds. Human intervention can matter just as much. Before I left, they added one more thing. He asked if he could contact you eventually, the consultant said. Not immediately. But when circumstances allow. I agreed without hesitation. Not curiosity. Closure. Because unfinished stories tend to linger otherwise. Driving back to base, I kept thinking about how close that situation must have been. 30 seconds. That's all the convoy pause lasted. 30 seconds that interrupted a plan nobody fully explained yet. And sometimes. Interruptions prevent consequences you never even see. At that point, I still didn't know how big those consequences might have been. But I was starting to understand. That roadside decision had probably mattered more than the initial report suggested. Months passed before I heard from him directly. Not surprising. People recovering from trauma, especially complicated situations involving coercion, usually need time before reconnecting with anything linked to that experience. Distance helps clarity. Stability helps confidence. Still, when the message arrived, I recognized the sender immediately. No official signature. Just a short line. "I'm safe now. And I owe you an explanation." Neutral tone. Professional. Not emotional. That matched what I'd already learned about him. We arranged to meet in a public place. Quiet cafe. Nothing dramatic. He specifically requested somewhere ordinary. No security presence. No official oversight. Just conversation. I respected that. Because after being controlled by others, autonomy matters. He looked different from the roadside casualty I remembered. Health restored. Posture steady. Awareness sharp. But there was also a kind of cautious attentiveness people carry after realizing how fragile safety can be. We kept introductions simple. No names beyond first names. No professional titles. Just two people connected by one moment neither planned. He spoke first. "They didn't want money from me," he said. "They wanted access." That clarified everything immediately. Not ransom. Not intimidation. Utilization. He explained carefully. He'd been working on advanced banking security systems. Encryption layers, intrusion detection protocols, redundancy architecture, the invisible defenses protecting financial infrastructure most people never think about. Someone had noticed. And decided his knowledge could be exploited. Kidnapping wasn't impulsive. It was organized. Controlled. Professional enough to keep him isolated without obvious violence. Psychological pressure instead of physical force. That kind of coercion often works better on specialists who value precision and logic. "They thought I'd cooperate," he said quietly. "Eventually." But he hadn't. Delays. Technical complications. Controlled misunderstandings. Enough resistance to slow progress without provoking escalation. Buying time. Until something changed. Transportation disruption. Confusion among his captors. A chance moment where supervision weakened. He took it. Escape wasn't clean. Minor injuries. Disorientation. No clear direction initially. But enough distance to avoid immediate recapture. Until exhaustion caught up with him. Roadside. Where our convoy happened to pass. Timing again. 30 seconds, he said. That's probably how long I had before someone else found me. Possibly true. Possibly worse. Either way, intervention mattered. I asked the question that had lingered since the consultation briefing. What would they have done if you'd cooperated? He didn't answer immediately. Just took a slow breath. Bank security breach, he said finally. Large scale. International implications. Not instant chaos, but systemic damage over time. Which meant financial instability. Trust erosion. Infrastructure disruption. Consequences far beyond one kidnapping. And suddenly that roadside decision expanded in scale. Not heroics. Just interruption. Still. Interruptions sometimes matter most. Before leaving, he added one more thing. I'm rebuilding my work now. Strengthening the systems they tried to exploit. Quietly. That felt right. Repair instead of retaliation. Stability instead of spectacle. And as we parted, I realized something clearly. That convoy stop hadn't just saved a person. It had probably prevented something larger. Even if nobody would ever publicly confirm it. After that conversation, I expected distance again. Closure usually leads to separation. You confirm someone's safe, understand what happened, then life resumes its normal direction. That's the healthiest outcome most of the time. But this situation didn't fit the usual pattern. He didn't disappear. Not dramatically, just gradually reappearing through occasional updates. Nothing operational. Nothing confidential. Just context. Progress. Recovery. And responsibility. Because surviving coercion changes how people approach their work. He explained it simply during our next meeting. I don't just design systems anymore, he said. I design resilience. That difference matters. Security isn't only about preventing intrusion. It's about ensuring systems continue functioning even when intrusion attempts happen. Continuity over perfection. Adaptability over rigidity. Military thinking translates surprisingly well there. So our conversations shifted. Less about what happened. More about what could prevent similar situations in the future. Infrastructure resilience. Crisis communication. Human factors in technical security environments. The overlap between operational discipline and digital protection became clearer the more we talked. Not collaboration officially. Just shared perspective. Still, impact grew quietly. He began supporting veteran cybersecurity training programs. Not publicized. Not charity-focused. Practical skill development. Career transition opportunities. Structured pathways. That part meant a lot to me. Because transition after service is often harder than service itself. Purpose doesn't disappear overnight. It needs redirection. At home, my family noticed the shift. Less tension. More constructive energy. My wife appreciated seeing military experience translate into civilian stability rather than lingering uncertainty. My son became increasingly interested in technology security fields himself. Influence spreads that way sometimes. Not imposed. Observed. Then one afternoon, he said something unexpected. They haven't tried again, he said. But that doesn't mean they won't. Calm tone. No fear. Just assessment. Reasonable assessment. Organized cybercrime networks don't abandon expertise interest easily. They adapt. Wait. Try different approaches. That's their operational model. I asked if he had protection. Yes, he said. Professionally arranged. Quiet. Effective. Good. Still, psychological awareness matters too. He understood that. So did I. Preparation without paranoia. Balance again. Months continued passing without incident. Systems strengthened. Training programs expanded. Financial infrastructure resilience improved incrementally. The kind of progress that never makes headlines but stabilizes environments long-term. And gradually, the story shifted in my own mind. That roadside stop wasn't about rescue anymore. It was about interruption. Interrupting a coercion chain. Interrupting potential financial system compromise. Interrupting consequences nobody might have fully predicted yet. Sometimes military experience teaches something simple. You don't always need to eliminate threats. Sometimes disrupting momentum is enough. Because disrupted plans often collapse on their own. And looking back, those 30 seconds we took roadside probably did exactly that. Not dramatic. Not celebrated. Just effective. Which, honestly, is usually the best outcome possible. Even if most people never know it happened. For a while, everything stayed stable. No new threats. No strange inquiries. No sudden complications. His cybersecurity work continued quietly, mostly behind the scenes. Financial institutions strengthened their digital defenses. Veteran training programs expanded steadily. Stability isn't exciting. But it's valuable. And usually temporary. The first sign of renewed attention didn't come through him. It came through me. An invitation arrived unexpectedly. Not military. Not official government. Private sector security conference. Focus, infrastructure resilience, crisis preparedness, civilian-military experience overlap. My name isn't widely known outside operational circles, so invitations like that aren't routine. Which meant someone had recommended me. I suspected who. I confirmed it later. He hadn't done it as a favor. He'd done it because perspective mattered. "You've seen systems under pressure," he said when I asked. "That knowledge translates." Fair point. Still, public visibility wasn't something I'd actively sought. Military service often conditions people to operate effectively without recognition. Spotlight can complicate things. But ignoring opportunities to share useful insight isn't responsible either. So I attended. Nothing dramatic happened. Just conversations. Panels. Quiet networking. People interested in resilience rather than heroics. Exactly the environment I prefer. But exposure creates ripples. A few weeks later, his company reported increased inquiries again. Not hostile. Just curious. Potential partners. Consultants. Analysts asking deeper operational questions. Normal business growth behavior. Yet timing felt familiar. Patterns rarely repeat identically, but they often rhyme. He remained calm about it. "So long as transparency stays intact," he said, "attention isn't inherently negative." True. Still, cybersecurity environments operate differently than most industries. Visibility increases both opportunity and risk simultaneously. Balance requires constant adjustment. We reviewed contingency communication protocols again. Nothing aggressive. Just preparedness. The same philosophy that governed that convoy stop months earlier. Measured response. Proportional action. Avoid unnecessary escalation. At home, my son started a cybersecurity fundamentals course. Not because of fear. Because interest had grown naturally. Seeing practical impact often inspires younger generations more effectively than lectures ever could. My wife supported it completely. "Understanding systems helps protect them," she said simply. Hard to argue with that. Weeks passed again without incident. Which suggested the renewed attention was exactly what it appeared, industry interest following successful resilience implementation. Still, one thing lingered in my mind. The original kidnapping attempt. Organized. Targeted. Professional. Groups operating at that level rarely abandon objectives permanently. They adapt. Shift focus. Wait for new opportunities. That doesn't mean immediate danger. It means ongoing awareness. He understood that too. "I don't expect another attempt," he told me once. "But I design systems assuming persistence exists." Smart approach. And one military experience reinforces constantly. Threats evolve. Preparation must evolve faster. Because sometimes, the biggest success isn't stopping something dramatic. It's preventing it quietly before anyone else notices. And that's exactly what his work, and indirectly, that convoy decision, continued accomplishing. Even if the connection stayed mostly invisible. Which, honestly, is often how effective protection works. Quiet. Consistent. Unnoticed. Until the day it isn't. The shift this time wasn't professional. It was personal. Not danger. Not threat. Just awareness settling closer to home. My son had been progressing steadily in cybersecurity studies. Nothing extreme, basic defensive systems, ethical hacking principles, infrastructure resilience concepts. The same kind of foundational knowledge many universities now encourage. He found it fascinating. Logical. structured, and importantly, purposeful. Watching him learn reminded me how different civilian paths to responsibility can look compared to military ones. Same values sometimes, just applied differently. Then one evening he asked a question that made me pause. "Do people ever try to recruit specialists the wrong way?" he said. "Not casual curiosity. Informed curiosity." Which meant he'd encountered discussions online or academically about coercion scenarios, exactly the kind of environment that had led to that roadside rescue months earlier. I answered honestly. "Sometimes," I said. "But strong systems, awareness, and support networks make exploitation harder." That reassurance wasn't theoretical. I'd seen it work. He nodded, processing. Not alarmed. Just thoughtful. And that's when I realized something quietly important. Prevention isn't only technical. It's generational. Teaching awareness early reduces vulnerability later. Meanwhile, his cybersecurity expert, now more colleague than rescued civilian, continued strengthening financial infrastructure protections quietly. No publicity. No dramatic announcements. Just steady improvement. That consistency mattered. Because cyber threats rarely disappear completely. They shift. Adapt. Test boundaries again when conditions change. We discussed that openly before. "I assume persistence," he often said. "Not inevitability. Just persistence." Military thinking aligns closely with that perspective. Expect pressure. Prepare accordingly. Stay calm when it arrives. A few weeks later, he invited both me and my son to observe one of his resilience workshops. Educational environment. Nothing operational. Just exposure to real-world system protection thinking. My son appreciated it. Not hero worship. Not intimidation. Just practical insight. And I appreciated something else. The continuity. A convoy decision leading to infrastructure protection. Infrastructure protection influencing education. Education strengthening future resilience. That's how stability grows. Quietly. Incrementally. Often invisibly. There was no renewed threat. No suspicious activity. No external pressure signals. Just responsible people doing their work carefully. Which sometimes feels anticlimactic compared to dramatic rescue narratives. But it's actually the goal. Because if systems function well, crises become less likely. And when crises are less likely, families breathe easier. Communities stabilize. Future risks shrink. Looking back at that roadside moment, I realized something simple. We didn't just rescue a person. We preserved expertise. And preserved expertise often protects far more people than individual interventions ever could. That realization settled deeply. Not dramatic. Just satisfying. Because sometimes the best outcome is the one where nothing bad happens afterward. And nobody even realizes how close it might have come. Stability lasted longer than I expected. No strange inquiries. No unusual business pressure. No indirect signal suggesting renewed interest from the group that had once tried to use him. Infrastructure programs expanded quietly. Veteran training initiatives gained traction. Financial systems adapted gradually. Which is how resilience is supposed to work. Not dramatic. Just consistent. Still, environments involving high-value expertise rarely stay completely static forever. The first signal wasn't operational. It was informational. He called one evening, calm tone, same measured pace he always maintained. "Nothing urgent," he said immediately. "But something worth awareness." That phrasing alone told me the situation was controlled but not insignificant. A cybersecurity audit team he worked with had detected probing activity. Not direct attacks. Not breaches. Just structured observation of certain financial defense systems, the same type he'd helped strengthen after his kidnapping. Professional-level reconnaissance. Subtle. Methodical. Exactly the kind of activity groups conduct before deciding whether renewed effort is worthwhile. Could be routine, he added. Could be unrelated. But pattern familiarity matters. That was true. Patterns rarely repeat exactly, but experienced professionals recognize echoes. I asked the practical question. Risk to you personally? Low, he answered. Protections improved. Visibility higher. And frankly, they know coercion wouldn't work now. That confidence came from preparation, not arrogance. Still, awareness helps. We discussed it briefly, not strategy, just perspective. Maintaining transparency, continuing routine security protocols, avoiding unnecessary alarm. Balanced response again. At home, I didn't bring it up immediately. No reason to create concern where none existed. Families deserve stability when possible. But the thought lingered. Not fear. Responsibility. Because decisions ripple outward. That convoy stop months ago had prevented one outcome. But prevention isn't a permanent state. It requires maintenance. That realization influenced something else too. My son's growing interest in cybersecurity suddenly felt less abstract. Less academic. More connected to real-world responsibility. Protection isn't only technical. It's cultural. Generational. We talked openly about resilience, awareness, ethical responsibility in digital environments. Not dramatic warnings, just realistic education. He handled it well. Curious. Thoughtful. Grounded. Exactly what you want future specialists to be. Meanwhile, his colleague, the once kidnapped expert, remained steady. Continued infrastructure work. Continued training initiatives. Continued quiet leadership. No escalation followed that initial probing detection. Which suggested either unrelated activity or deterrence working effectively. Both positive outcomes. Still, the experience reinforced something important for me. Rescue moments feel intense. But long-term stability depends on what happens afterward. Preparation. Education. Consistency. And sometimes, simply paying attention when the past sends faint reminders it hasn't completely disappeared. Not to create fear. Just to maintain readiness. Because readiness, when balanced properly, often prevents problems from growing large enough to notice publicly. And honestly, that's usually the best possible outcome. Nothing dramatic happened after that. No renewed kidnapping attempts. No direct cyber attacks connected to him personally. No escalating pressure. Just quiet confirmation that preparedness works. Sometimes that's the hardest part to accept, that stability itself can be the outcome. Military training often conditions you to expect clear threats, clear responses, clear resolution. Civilian resilience rarely follows that structure. It's slower. Subtler. More dependent on consistency than reaction. His cybersecurity work kept evolving. Financial systems strengthened incrementally. Training programs matured. Veteran participation increased steadily. Nothing headline-worthy, but undeniably effective. Which is exactly how good infrastructure operates. Invisible when functioning correctly. At home, that invisibility became a kind of comfort. My wife appreciated the predictable rhythm we'd built. My son progressed confidently in his studies, increasingly interested not just in technology itself but in its protective role. Protection had become a shared theme in our household. Different forms. Same purpose. Every now and then, I'd drive past roads similar to the one where we found him. Same dust patterns. Same quiet stretches. Same potential for moments that change trajectories without warning. It no longer felt dramatic. Just reflective. Because perspective shifts once you see how one decision can ripple outward quietly over time. We still met occasionally, professionally more than personally. Discussions about resilience, veteran integration, infrastructure continuity. The friendship remained understated. Mutual respect tends to stabilize relationships better than obligation ever could. During one conversation, he said something that summarized the entire experience for me. I used to think survival was the end goal, he said. Now I think stability is. That distinction matters. Survival is immediate. Stability is sustained. Both require effort. But stability requires patience. And patience often prevents crises before they become visible. The initial kidnapping attempt never resurfaced publicly. Investigations likely continued somewhere beyond our view. Organized groups adapt, shift priorities, dissolve, reform. That cycle isn't unique to cybersecurity environments. But his expertise remained protected. Which meant financial infrastructure stayed stronger. Which meant communities relying on those systems stayed more secure. Indirect impact. But real. Looking back, that convoy stop felt less like intervention and more like interruption. A brief disruption that prevented a chain reaction nobody fully predicted yet. Interruptions don't always get recognition. They often don't need it. Because outcomes speak quietly over time. And sometimes, the most meaningful stories aren't about dramatic rescues. They're about what happens afterward. The stability. The continuity. The unseen protection. And the realization that responsibility doesn't end when immediate danger passes. It just changes form. Usually into something quieter. But just as important. People usually expect stories like this to end with closure. Clear villains. Clear victories. Clear confirmation that the danger is gone. Real life rarely offers that. Instead, it offers continuation. The convoy stop, the rescue, the revelation about the attempted coercion, those moments were intense, yes. But intensity fades. What remains is responsibility, and responsibility tends to be quieter. Years have passed since that roadside decision. No dramatic follow-up incidents. No public investigations tied back to him. No visible attempts to repeat what happened. His cybersecurity work continues steadily, focused on prevention rather than reaction. Financial systems he helped secure have adapted well. Threat landscapes shifted elsewhere. Which is a success, even if it doesn't feel cinematic. At home, stability deepened further. My son completed his studies and began working in cybersecurity infrastructure himself, not because of fear, but because he saw how protection can matter without spectacle. My wife appreciates the predictability that replaced operational uncertainty. That predictability used to feel strange. Now it feels earned. Every once in a while, I still replay that moment in my head, the convoy slowing, the 30-second decision, the injured stranger near the road. Not regret. Not pride. Just perspective. Because I know now that the real impact wasn't the rescue itself. It was what followed. His expertise remained intact. Financial systems stayed secure. Veterans gained training opportunities. A younger generation learned awareness earlier. None of that appeared in the original report. Reports focus on immediate outcomes. Life focuses on long-term consequences. We still talk occasionally, he and I. Not about the kidnapping. Not about money or influence. Mostly about continuity, how systems hold up under pressure, how organizations adapt, how people carry responsibility forward. Professional conversations. Respectful. Normal. And that normality is probably the best possible ending. No dramatic threats lingering. No unfinished confrontations. Just two people who intersected at a critical moment continuing their respective paths. Sometimes people ask if I consider that day heroic. I don't. It was a calculated decision under limited information. The kind professionals make routinely. The difference is simply that this one had visible consequences later. Most don't. But they still matter. That's the part nobody writes down. The quiet decisions. The small interruptions. The steady preparation afterward. Because the real goal isn't dramatic rescue. It's preventing situations where rescue becomes necessary at all. And if that convoy stop contributed even slightly to that, then it was enough. No headlines required. Just stability. Which, honestly, is the outcome most professionals aim for anyway. Even if the story stays mostly invisible. Some consequences never announce themselves. If this story stayed with you, there are more like it on hidden chapters. Like the video and subscribe for the next chapter. And if nothing seemed to happen, would you trust that nothing did?